When you hear climate change, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably melting ice caps, right? Or maybe rising seas. And yeah, that's definitely part of it. But that's not the whole story, not even close. What we're going to dig into today is how this isn't just an environmental thing. It's something that touches, well, pretty much every part of modern life. So let's get into it. So, the big question is how? How does a few degrees of warming turn into a crisis of everything? It sounds dramatic, I know, but there's a real thread here that connects the food on your plate to your health, our entire economy, and even global security. To really get a grip on that, we've got to start with a clear definition. Okay, so what are we really talking about here? At its heart, it's a long-term change in the planet's normal temperature and weather patterns. And the key thing is, it's mostly driven by us, by human activities like burning fossil fuels. That stuff releases greenhouse gases, which act like a blanket, trapping more heat in the atmosphere. This isn't just some natural fluctuation, It's an acceleration. It's on us. And that change, it has some very real, very human consequences. All right, enough with the high-level stuff. Let's bring this down to earth and see how this whole thing actually gets personal. We're going to look at three of the most direct ways it hits home: what we eat, how we feel, and where we live. And, it all really starts with our food. Think about it. Our entire global food system, everything from a small farm to a giant corporation, is built on one simple idea: that the climate is predictable, that the rains will come when they're supposed to. When that foundation starts to crack, our food security starts to crumble right along with it. And look how all of this is connected. It's like a domino effect. You get weird, unpredictable rainfall, bam, crop yields go down. You get a massive heat wave, that's incredibly stressful for livestock. And when there's less food to go around, what happens? Prices shoot up, which can lead to serious malnutrition. The tough part, as the source material points out, is that the people who get hit the hardest are the small farmers in developing countries, the very people with the fewest resources to bounce back from a disaster like this. But this crisis doesn't just stop at our dinner table. The exact same things that mess with our farms, the extreme heat, the changing weather, they also have a direct and sometimes deadly effect on our health. This really shows how a climate problem morphs into a full-blown health crisis. I mean, we're seeing more fatalities directly from heat waves. And get this, warmer weather lets insects like mosquitoes travel to new places, bringing diseases like malaria and dengue with them. On top of that, the air pollution that comes with burning fossil fuels, that goes straight into our lungs. All of this puts a huge, huge strain on healthcare systems, especially in places that are already struggling to keep up. Okay, so we've talked food, we've talked health, but what happens when the place you call home just isn't livable anymore? That's the third massive human cost we've got to talk about: the loss of home. Yeah, climate change is quickly becoming one of the biggest reasons people have to leave their homes. It can be something sudden, like a massive flood, or something that creeps up on you, like a drought that never ends, or the sea slowly swallowing the coast. Either way, people are forced to move. And this creates this whole other crisis. It puts incredible pressure on the cities they move to, and can even spark new conflicts over things like water and land. All right, so we've seen the direct impacts on people. Now let's zoom out a bit. Because these personal crises don't happen in a vacuum. They create these massive ripple effects that can shake up entire economies and even threaten global security. This quote here, it's so important. It calls climate change a threat multiplier, and that is the perfect way to think about it. See, climate change doesn't always invent brand new problems. What it does, and it does it really well, is it finds existing problems, things like a shortage of water or a shaky political situation, and it just makes them way, way worse. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Let's just walk through how this works, step by step. So you start with an extreme weather event, let's say a really bad drought. Okay, step one. That leads directly to step two. Resources like food and water become scarce. Then, as we just talked about, that can lead to step three. People have to move to survive. And when you have a lot of desperate people moving around with not enough resources to go around, well, that's how you get to step four: political instability and sometimes even conflict. And you better believe our economy feels these shocks too. Just think about it. A hurricane or a flood can take out ports, roads, power grids, all the stuff that makes our world run. That messes up the global supply chains that we all depend on for, well, everything. Insurance companies start paying out massive claims, which means prices go up for all of us. And for developing countries, the hit can be absolutely devastating. One single disaster can wipe out years of economic growth, trapping them in this terrible cycle. So, this brings us to a really critical and frankly, a pretty uncomfortable part of this whole story, the question of fairness. Because the reality is, the pain of climate change isn't shared equally, not by a long shot. This chart right here just lays it all out. It's so clear. On the one hand, you have the countries that are historically responsible for most of the emissions. That's the developed world. But on the other hand, you have the countries that are most vulnerable to the impacts, and that's largely the developing world, the places without the money or infrastructure to protect themselves. And that's the heart of the injustice, right there. The people who did the least to create this mess are the ones suffering the most. And if you want a real-world example, just look at Pakistan. This is a country that's responsible for less than 1% of global emissions, a tiny, tiny fraction. And yet, it's getting hit with absolutely catastrophic climate impacts, from melting glaciers up north to brutal floods and killer heat waves. I mean, this isn't just a chart on a screen. This is the reality for millions of people right now. And this whole question of justice, it isn't just about who's getting hit where. It's also about when. The decisions we're making right now, or the ones we're not making, are going to define the world that our kids and grandkids have to live in. There's a huge moral weight to that, isn't there? A real obligation to leave them something better. Okay, so we've laid out just how big this challenge is. It can feel pretty overwhelming. But where do we go from here? Well, the good news is, it's not hopeless. The path forward really boils down to a two-part strategy, with both parts working towards the same goal. And this is really the central conversation in climate policy. It's all about two key ideas, mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation is all about attacking the root cause, cutting down those greenhouse gas emissions, switching to clean energy, that kind of thing. Adaptation is different. That's about managing the effects that are already here or are definitely coming, like building bigger seawalls or finding crops that can survive a drought. So you've got prevention on one side and survival on the other. And if there's one thing to take away from this, it's this. This is not an either-or situation. It's not a choice. We have to do both. We can't just adapt, because if we don't cut emissions, the problems will eventually get too big to handle. And we can't only focus on cutting emissions, because a certain amount of change is already baked in and people on the front lines need help right now. We absolutely, positively have to do both at the same time. So when we talk about mitigation, the road ahead is actually pretty clear. It means we have to switch, and switch fast, to renewable energy like solar and wind. It means getting a lot smarter about how we use energy and investing in new, cleaner tech. And this is so crucial. It's going to take the whole world working together. Richer countries have to step up and help developing nations make that green switch with both money and technology. And that really is where things stand. The science couldn't be clearer. The impacts are no longer some distant threat. They're here. And the solutions, we have them. They exist. So we know what to do. The real question, the one that everything hinges on, isn't about technology anymore. It's about us. It's about will. Can we, all of us as a global community, finally act together with the speed and scale that this crisis of everything truly demands?